Dear friends, welcome to the next episode of Top Talk, where we are still discussing the Georgian elections and the post-election situation, because this whole state of affairs is not only an a domestic issue for Georgia, but it's a regional development, and this is why it is very interesting, and it's also concerning us in the neighboring countries. Today, I'm hosting Mr. George Mchedlishvili, foreign policy expert from Georgia and as associate professor at the European University in Tbilisi. Hello, Georgi. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's a pleasure, Georgi. I already gave a very short introduction why the Georgian election is of great importance for us. The election did not, unfortunately, bring clarity into the governance in Tbilisi, while the ruling Georgian Dream Party declared a resounding victory. There are voices, including the opposition, international observers, and Georgia's own president, who found the results fraudulent and illegitimate. And there is now one simple question when it comes to the domestic developments in Georgia that puzzles many international observers, including myself. What is next?
Well, thank you. That's a very important question. Which will be hard to answer within a few minutes. But because of the limited time frame of the program, I will have to try to actually concentrate it in a few important points. As you rightly mentioned, so we are now living this second round of the election, like post-election period, which will last for, I guess, few more weeks. It seems that, you mentioned this discrepancy, significant discrepancy between the results issued by the Central Electoral Commission and the exit poll. It also has to be mentioned that the exit poll is hired by the major opposition channel. So again, many people, and I think rightly, question its impartiality. So I believe that the actual figure it will ever transpired is somewhere in between. So according to the exit polls, run by the opposition-friendly Edison Research, Georgian Dream garnered 41% of the votes, and the opposition garnered about 50%, and the Central Electoral Commission results are radically different: 53 for the government versus 41 for the opposition. Actually a flipped outcome. Obviously, it means a stalemate. Looks like the opposition had in mind that they will be unhappy with these official results, which remain to be seen how close to the reality. And they either didn't thought out well or were not prepared for this plan B. They organized a major rally in the center of Tbilisi on the second day, on the 28th of October, then the second one on the 4th. There are also intermittent movements. They seem to be roaming different parts of the city, calling for civil disobedience, but obviously the numbers are disappointing for them. The number of people who gather on these rallies can be explained by a variety of reasons, but there is probably a certain degree of apathy. People are tired of the political debates. People are distrustful of the political landscape, of the political, I would say, spectrum of the country, both ends and the middle. So because they see on the one hand, the Georgian Dream Party, and probably we'll discuss about this later, have resorted to many methods, some of them questionable, in order, during the election campaign, how to retain power at all cost. While it also seems obvious that this is a no holds barred battle on the part of opposition as well, who will invent any story, who will stop to no accusations, in order to gain popular support. It is obvious that the people see that on both sides. We see just the sheer desire to get power rather than actually kind of longer term strategic vision for the development of the country. That is unfortunately lacking, because when you listen to the rallies of the opposition, rallies of the ruling party, so it was not about programs. And this is for me very sad as a citizen of the country which wants to become European. So maybe this electoral campaign in Europe is like more dull, more boring, but that's what I want for my country in this particular regard. So I do not want this political fight to be political battles, to be mutual accusations, absolutely zero-sum game approach. Literally no discussions among the political leaders, among the representatives of the ruling party and the opposition being in the same building. It's very extremely rare. So that's why I believe this is a stalemate which has to be resolved. I believe personally that for me, as well as for other citizens, the final report of the OSCE ODIHR mission, we have had a significant international presence in this regard in Georgia, about 2,800 people. And the most, I guess, important and the organization of the greatest international repute is ODIHR, and they should issue a final report in the coming days. So they had a preliminary press conference where, they were very circumspect. They didn't actually kind of make stark statements, and therefore you cannot actually make this clear interpretation, probably kind of because a situation wasn't clear at the time at all. But it remains to be seen whether the deviations and whether these election rigging schemes were significant enough to effectively to affect the outcome. So it remains to be seen. I guess in a few days it will become clear. And then for me, it will be an important marker whether the elections were, with a huge stretch, fair, or they were not. They actually kind of cannot be subsumed into the category of being imperfect but still fair.
That's interesting, Georgi. Thank you for your comprehensive response. Apathy is the word you use when you refer to the mood of masses. I know that mass rallies are usually part of the Georgian political culture. And I recall how the infamous Gavrilov's night triggered mass rallies which continued non-stop for several months, from May or June until the end of the year. And then we remember the societal resistance, heavy resistance towards the so-called foreign agent law. But these elections, they are way more important than those two episodes. Let's put it this way. These are geopolitical elections. These will determine Georgia's future path. And this is when the society must either protect, their voices, or does it mean that they simply acknowledge that Georgian Dream's victory was worthy enough, so there is nothing to challenge anymore? And by the way, why I'm asking, because based on my observations, based on my own trips to Georgia, I've always noticed how polarized the society is, and there are some people who even predicted far worse scenarios for the post-election situation in Georgia. God forbid, even civil war developments. How do you think? What is happening, or what is about to happen?
Well, in the first place, I very much hope, all of us, obviously, know as a friend of Georgia, you hope too that you mentioned, God forbid, the civil war will not occur, because it will be the extreme scenario which will push Georgia back by decades. Well, you also already rightly mentioned that infamous foreign agents law, which many opponents call Russian law. I wouldn't go that far calling it Russian law, because it differs. And also, I believe that Georgia will never slump back to the state of today's Russia in terms of democracy and the freedom of speech. I believe that Georgia is a partially free country. reached certain point of no return. So we will hardly become country like Belarus or Russia anymore, because we have tasted enough freedom over the past 3 decades. Of course, but obviously there is nothing good about this law. In the first place, I also mentioned it was very unwise, to put it mildly, move on the part of the ruling party and the government to reintroduce this law after the protests last year, which were successful. But maybe it was a strategic, maybe. Because for 3 months people protested, but the law was still passed. Very unnecessary, because without that law, I believe that in late March, a few times a year, all Georgia, the entirety of Georgia is waiting for these opinion polls by NDI, National Democratic Institute, and IRI, International Republic Institute. So they both arrived in early spring, and they showed a significant advantage, significant edge that the ruling party had over its political opponent. It seemed that if nothing happens, and well, it seemed to be summer, which is actually politically like neutral season, and early fall, well, and they were poised for comfortable victory. Not sure with constitutional majority or not, but obviously there will be like no question that they had the significant edge. And then, like a bolt from the blue, they created a major headache for themselves. But on the other hand, maybe it was a strategic move. People vented their protest for 3 months, and they didn't achieve anything. The law was still passed, and obviously it adds to the sense of frustration in the population. If so many people at some point, well, several rallies numbered about 100,000. At one point, it was nearly 200,000 people in one rally. A fifth of the population of Tbilisi, and many people came from the other regions of Georgia. So that was a huge drive. People were really ballistic. They were irate about actually this law, but it was still introduced, and maybe, well, people understand that, well, no matter how hard they protest, so they won't be able to achieve anything. So I believe, of course, it is like a cold shower for many, particularly young people. And another factor is that this protest is run by the politician. In the spring, we had the societal reaction. It was a grassroots. It was bottom up. And, whenever politicians try to capitalize and opportunistically use it actually kind of for their political gains, majority of society rejected it. Many people, because the turnout was greater than usual, it was almost as big as 2012, and another seminal election when we had this peaceful transfer of power. Many people voted not for the respective one of the 4 political parties, but primarily against the Georgian dream. So the support per se for the political parties is not as big as the number of votes they received, because it was a protest vote, similar to 2012, by the way. So therefore, there is a limited political support. As I mentioned, there is distrust towards the politicians across the board. Some political parties, for instance, like 2 of them, are associated with the previous governance, which was noted for significant lack of democracy and the freedom of speech. Well, and of course, when those people now talk about the virtues of democracy, virtues of freedom, obviously people take it with a big pinch of salt. 2 other political parties, which pretend to be equidistant from these 2 poles, I mean, the United National Movement associated with the previous leadership and the Georgian Dream. So they also do not enjoy significant trust, because majority of people view them as just people craving for power rather than significant change and the future of Georgia. So therefore, our brighter future of Georgia. So that's why there is a multitude of factors which contributes to, I would say, muted popular support for this protest movement. Although many people, of course, sympathize, but not as far as actually kind of like leaving their dwellings and protesting.
It's really interesting, because you rightly mentioned that there have been some steps and actions taken by the Georgian Dream, the ruling party, prior to the elections, which did not make any sense. They would have made sense after the elections, let's put it this way. But even after so many actions which were criticized by the society, the opposition still could not challenge. Even in the united form, they could not challenge the Georgian dream. And I also heard this complaint from some European experts and officials that what the Georgian opposition figures do, they usually go and address the Western audiences rather than working with the domestic groupings inside Georgia. But I just referred to the Europeans. I also, while preparing for this interview, I checked some of your other statements and conversations, and you also had this statement where you kind of complained also that when it comes to Moldova, no one in the West asks Chisinau to join anti-Russia sanctions, or when it comes to Armenia, we see how much the trade between Armenia and Russia is growing, and we can suspect, and there is also evidence how Armenia helps Russia evade sanctions. But there are many actors in the West who simply turn a blind eye for these. But Georgia is usually a scapegoat. Georgia is subject to a lot of criticism before the elections, during and after. So, what is your take on this? Is Georgia still going Europe, or?
In the first place, yes, maybe Georgia. We can notice, we can spot the elements of the double standards here in approaching like Georgia and Moldova, Armenia on the other hand. Well, but okay, one argument would be that since Georgia is already a candidate country, since Georgia is poised, Georgia is chosen, it has it in its constitution that is to become the integral part of the West, institutionally as well as actually domestically, then therefore it is natural to hold Georgia to a more stringent standards. But still, they should fall short of what is perceived as double standards. You mentioned about this opposition campaign. Yes, they seem to be concentrating on this downtown Tbilisi. Well, when they actually won, even according to this Central Electoral Commission exit polls and the actual outcomes. I personally was a commission member in one of these central districts of Tbilisi, and in my district, so the united opposition, four parties, they garnered 44% of the votes, and the ruling party garnered 41 or 42. So it was a small but still advantage on the part in favor of the opposition. Yes, this is significant that. And that was a major factor of the underperformance of the opposition. They mostly rallied in downtown Tbilisi. They appealed to this, as they believe, actually educated class, this educated bubble of the Tbilisi population, rather than campaigning outside the city, campaigning in the countryside. So then their campaign was very, very insignificant, hardly noticeable. And many people, for those who were relatively neutral, who were not big fans of the Georgian dream because of the problems in the governance, neither they really liked opposition. So these sway voters, many of them, without any threat, without intimidation, without any bribery, chose the Georgian dream because they saw that if those leaders of the opposition, they constantly go to the West, which is a nice thing to do, but not at the expense of the domestic voters and actually kind of the people, their electorate, who constantly go to the West, appeal, talk about actually lack of democracy of Georgia, and try to get their support. So are they trying to come to power on the crest of the Western support or because of the popular support of Georgia? Do they want to stage some unrest with the help of the Western actors rather than appeal to the needs of the population? So that were the questions which many people answered not in favor of the opposition. And you were absolutely right. So today Armenia is presented as a beacon of democracy. I very much support the current drive of Armenia to extricate themselves from this bear hug of Russia, which will be difficult. But this desire is obviously commendable. But still, so many things are to be done. what we saw are just symbolic steps. For instance, like in the international airport, Zvartnoy Yerevan International Airport, they're no longer Russian security, Russian border guards. Neither they are on the border between Armenia and Iran. This is nice, this is commendable, but still, Armenia is the part of the CSTO, the ECAS analog of NATO, as well as Eurasian European Union, Eurasian Economic Union. Well, they are giving cold shoulder to their membership. They miss several meetings, several important summits, but still they are formally members, and therefore it will be a significant stretch to call Armenia as beacon of democracy, liberty in the South Caucasus. And turning a blind eye, you very rightly mentioned, to this soaring trade turnover between Armenia and Russia, which nearly quadrupled in the past 3 years. It is obvious why it quadrupled, and it is obvious that Armenia, as long as other countries, but it seems that Armenia is one of the hubs in this sanction evasion mechanisms. And then, not saying a word about that, and punishing Georgia for not joining the sanctions, which would pretty much kill the Georgian economy without significant harm to Russia. Of course, it is unfair. For instance, neither Turkey joined the sanctions, being a major, I would say, intermediary between Russia and Ukraine, and on several occasions they did a wonderful job in, for instance, actually kind of like the restoring the trade, for instance, in grains in the Black Sea. For all their commendable efforts, well, they didn't join the sanctions. They enjoy the revenue from Russian tourists, which Western countries no longer enjoy because of this is part of the sanctions. Well, ambassador is recalled from Georgia, but not from Turkey, not from other countries, which are obviously not doing their, I would say, kind of like fair share of supporting Ukraine kind of institutionally, obviously. So there was a sense that the Georgia is sort of a scapegoat, and it inspired certain people in Georgia to vote for the Georgian dream rather than for the West, which is inconsistent. And that actually brings me to the larger issue. Maybe we'll can zoom out a little bit for a while from the region and talk more geopolitically and geoeconomically. We are in this new Cold War. I very much hope that it will remain cold for as many years as it lasts. The major actor on the other side is China. Russia is a major spoiler and kind of the ally of China in this regard. So in this Cold War,
let me then try to formulate my question so you can also organize your answer in this regard, because I launched our conversation with the what's next question, but it was more about the internal situation in Georgia and your predictions about the future developments. And I want to also conclude this discussion with a similar what's next question, but rather in a broader geopolitical context. So how would you assess Georgia or Georgia's contribution to the new regional security architecture, or how Georgia is going to respond, is better to respond to what is happening around us? It's Donald Trump's back in the White House. It's possible ceasefire in Ukraine, maybe next year. There is more and more speculation about this. The Middle East is still burning. So what is awaiting us?
Well, again, this is another, I would say, $1 billion question, and and actually, we'll have to enter the ungrateful realm of political forecast or geopolitical forecast, which is really ungrateful because it's so easy, actually, because there are so many factors. Well, the victory of Donald Trump is just one step. Well, he will not enter the White House before January 20th. And we will find out who is in his team within a month after that, by mid-February probably. So therefore, it's at the moment it's hard to predict what his policies will be. And also we should remember more broadly that electoral campaign oftentimes differs from the actual policies of the leaders, because they are determined, they are shaped by events, they are shaped by these happenings, which might be very unexpected. Yes. I'm sure that George Bush Jr. did not campaign to be the 9/11 consequence leader, to be the leader of the war against terror. So he didn't know about 9/11, so obviously. Yeah. So, and I remember his campaign. He was campaigning for more benign America, less internationalist, and that actually yes. like won him some votes in this more isolationist, actually kind of a quarters of the U.S. population again. So that was Trump was campaigning to win. Then now he will be the president, like to be reelected again. But the first two to 3 years we will see his actual policies, like what he believes in. And I hope that he learned from his initial 4 years that he has to be more internationalist, that the ceasefire, however good it is, it saves lives, obviously. So not a normal person will be for war and against ceasefire, but it depends at what cost. So, so shall we keep the status quo? No Ukrainian citizens. So it seems that those who stayed in Ukraine, those either 25 to 30 million people who are still in Ukraine, not a single one wants any concession. So therefore, there will be significant pressure on their leadership, like not to concede the ground, even though the pressure on the part of the Trump administration would be like just to stop the war no matter what. Again, I'm just speculating, and again, speculation is very general, ungrateful business. Let me very briefly return to the Georgian situation, actually, just like for a couple of minutes. So, on the question of what next? What next is that after OSCE mission conclusion, the deadline is November 21st or 22nd, when the parliament should start working. So it should congregate if opposition refuses, and there are protests, and if international reaction is negative, if ODIHR report is damning, again, it is a possibility. I personally wouldn't speculate on that either. Then there will be a significant threat of this second election, of this repeat election, well, again, which is not a good outcome for Georgian democracy, but still, again, luckily not a civil war. So, however, if the report is, I would say dim green light, again with a stretch, but still actually kind of like acceptable, then opposition will fulminate. But there, I would say, kind of the steam will come to not within few weeks, I guess, and all actors, even those who were critical of Georgia, international actors, will have to accept these new realities and work with the government with the usual carrot and stick approach, with the conditionalities and the rewards. I believe, and I mentioned actually, kind of there is a room for improvement, for being wiser with regard to Georgia and develop a truly judicious policies. Okay, more consistent, more judicious, more longer term and fairer. So which will not be perceived by Georgia as double standard. Internationally, Georgia as well as South Caucasus, of course, it will be an important region, maybe not as pivotal as East Asia or Middle East because of this the constant threat of warfare there. But it's close to the Middle East, it's close to Europe. This is a region which borders Black Sea, which is on the Caspian Sea, which is rich resources, though therefore obviously there will be a place. And I think that significant advantage or significant dividend will be having the South Caucasus as the fully fledged regions. I very much hope, well, I'm not a religious person, but just by the cross fingers that very soon there is a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and this terrible conflict between the two countries is finally the part of history. And it creates significant opportunities for the region, like major opportunities, because if the region is a fully fledged region, of course, peaceful, stable, with a measure of domestic stability, with certain economic growth, then of course international actors will be willing to invest, will be willing actually to develop business. So we might become a really true oasis, if you will, of prosperity and stability. There is a possibility. And we will be the region where the Cold War, when the wheels of the Cold War will not blow as intensely in other regions. So it is possible for this for the region to be a major trade route between China, East Asia, and the European Union. So, of course, they are major economic powers. They do have different geopolitical goals, but they still trade. Well, even during the Cold War, during the most intense and risky years of the Cold War, the first Cold War, there was a trade between East and West, between the Eastern Bloc and the Western democracies. So therefore, it is possible, and our region should try to position itself this way. And each country are free to develop their domestic institutions, to have the governance as they see fit, and international actors should respect it. So that's important. Yes. And for me, the victory of Donald Trump is. I guess the opportunity. It is a hard opportunity. They have to roll up their sleeves and work on that. I mean, European Union. It's high time. It's high time for European Union to transform, to develop, to progress into a meaningful geopolitical entity, which was lacking, which was sorely lacking over the past decade. It was more obvious in the past decade because. After this initial Russian aggression against Ukraine, kind of the annexation of Crimea and general more aggressive stance, obviously European Union, they developed the global strategy, but so little has been done in this regard. They had to grow their geopolitical muscle, they want it or not. And maybe since Donald Trump previously on several occasions mentioned that he will not be supporting monetarily, he will not be providing economic support and to Europe for free, they will have to do it for themselves, which I think is a fair arrangement.
Yeah, Georgi, I really thank you. We covered not only the most important elections in South Caucasus, but also the most important elections across the globe. And I really appreciate your vivid, engaging discussion. I enjoyed every second of it, and I'm already looking forward to a new conversation with you sometime soon.
Okay, thank you very much.